In this video, you'll observe what kind of subjects you can photograph to capture lines, and then also how to edit these photographs using Lightroom in the most effective way. Now, a few tips is to make sure that you get a clear focus of the objects and the texture, and also that your intention is to make sure that the viewer guesses what they're looking at. In this example, I'm using the blinds of my windows. Now, as you can see, I am getting very close to the camera. I focus and I increase and decrease the contrast. And this is how the photograph looks like. Now, in this one is a bit more complicated, so I'm using the top of the microphone. Now, I get very close, but notice that I can't be able to focus, and so I put the camera back, and then as you notice that I am actually zooming in, so I actually zoomed in 3 times the zoom, and still keeping my camera at a distance. And so once I make sure that I have the microphone texture in focus, I simply take a photograph. Even things in the kitchen can be very helpful. So in this one, I used the I sliced an onion, and the same thing. I magnified it and I zoomed in. I didn't put the camera close to the onion, but I kept it at a distance, and then I zoomed in. And once I get the right exposure and focus, I take the photograph. So editing photographs in Lightroom, someone actually asked me a question is, why do we edit so many things using Lightroom? Well, there are 4 reasons why. Number 1 is that the photographs always need to be edited. If you let the camera do the work for you, it gives you what it wants, not what you want. And so you need to have more control over the way your photographs look like, not the way the camera thinks you want it. Now, the second reason is because a photograph that might look bad might look better after editing. So, for example, if you have an overexposed photograph, you might want to edit it using black and white, and it'll completely make the photograph look different. So once it was bad, now it's better. Now, the third reason is because it'll help set up the mood, the tone, or the setting of your photograph, depending if you photograph it using color or black and white editing. And so this is a good way that it can change the tone of the photograph. It might make it seem either a happy or a sad photograph. And lastly, it'll help you develop you as a photographer. It'll help you develop your own style, whether it's in color editing, black and white. Every photographer is different. Now, let's get started on editing these photographs. Now, after that being said, now let's try to go ahead and edit some of these photographs and see what would be the best approach. Now, the first photograph that I have is the onion. And as always, you need to make sure that you set your white balance to auto. Now, when you're messing with the exposure, you either want to overexpose it or underexpose it. That is completely up to you. So for my example, I'm going to underexpose it, so I'm going to decrease the exposure. Now, I am increasing the contrast because if you decrease the contrast, it'll make it kind of blurry. So you want to keep it sharp. Now, here's my tip. When it comes to highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, I would prefer, just for a safety measure, to keep it using the same numbers. So in this example, the highlights, I set it to a positive 25. And then the shadows, I do it in a negative 25. Whites, positive 25, and then blacks, negative 25. So this is a good way to keep a balance. So that'll be one of my tips for you. If you put a number on one of them, try to keep it the same balance, negative and positive. Okay, that'll be my tip. Now, I went back and I decreased the exposure a little bit. Now, this is optional if you're using color or black and white, but in the onion there really isn't much you can do, but you can edit the color individually. And so this is just a personal preference. You don't have to, and I know that in my last videos I was telling you guys to mess with the color, but again, that is just a personal choice. This is just my choice that I like to edit color in black and white still. So after a lot of practice, this could be something that you guys can do. Now, always make sure that you do mess with the texture and the clarity, so that way the photograph can be a little bit more sharp and crispier. Crisp, not crispy. And finally, the last part you can use is the haze, but again, that is just another option you guys can do. And so here is how the photograph looks like now. Now the next photograph is wood. And so when it comes to the wood, it may seem kind of plain and boring, but it actually gives a lot of good texture. So in this example, as always, make sure that your white balance is set to auto, and it'll try to give you the sharpest whites. Increase or decrease the exposure. So, I mean, I don't try to go too far off like 30s or 40s, but that is a choice that I make. Contrast, always increase the contrast. And then remember what I said about highlights, shadows, blacks and whites. If you pick a certain number, try to keep it balanced with the other ones too. So in this one, I think I went up to 30. And then with shadows, I'm gonna go with -30. And then with whites, I'm gonna go with +30. And then with blacks, I'm gonna go -30. So again, this is just a tip that I can give you guys to begin with, but results can vary, but this is just a way to keep your photographs very well balanced. And then of course, this is just a personal choice. If you want to edit color, you can. It may or may not show much difference, but I've been using Lightroom for a while, and so I may notice little subtle differences that'll kind of help the photograph have or achieve its darkest blacks and its brightest whites. And of course my battery's gonna run out. So once we're done with the edits, make sure that that you actually save it to your camera roll, export it to Schoology, and then here's the results of that photograph. But now let's try to edit this photograph in color. So I'm gonna go back and reset everything as it was originally. Set your white balance to auto. Increase or decrease your exposure. For this one, I want to decrease it always. But always increase your contrast, never decrease your contrast. Now I'm going to increase the highlights and the shadows. I know that the last time I did was a 30, and this time I did a 25. Because again, results will be different in both color and black and white. So try to keep it balanced. So +25, -25, +25, -25. Sometimes you might have negative on the highlights and the whites and positives on the blacks and the shadows, but again, it just depends on the photograph. Make sure that you increase your contrast and clarity. Now in a color photograph, color will make a difference. So this will be mostly on some of the yellows and the oranges because of the cut of the wood, a little bit of the green on the molding of the wood, but again, sometimes it will be very, very subtle. Notice a difference of the before and after, so just leave your screen pressed, and then once you're done, make sure that you export it into your camera roll to submit to Schoology. Now here's the before, the photograph as was taken by the camera, and this is the after some color editing, and then finally here is the black and white photograph. Now again, this is just a personal liking to you all. I really do hope that this video was very, very helpful, especially when it comes to the blacks, whites, shadows, and highlights, and making sure that they stay balanced. I really, really hope that that was very helpful. And so if it was, then I hope you apply this into your photographs. I really encourage you guys to experiment with both, but if you prefer one method, then I would say apply it. But I would advise you to understand that there are some photographs that will look better in color, or some that will look better in black and white. So whichever is your preference, I highly encourage you to at least experiment with both of them. But with that being said, good luck on your photos. Please take care of yourself, take care of those around you, and please be safe.